There's a bunch of partners were there. I think it was put on by a watershed alliance or something like that. It's an official sponsor.
Yeah.
So did you check out yourself off here? Well, if you're not on there, you don't get to have treats. Oh.
I know.
Pass it to you guys here. Oh, you did? Excellent. You got it? Okay.
Did you get me going?
I think so, yeah. I'm just trying to get the recording part of it set up now. But I think we should be all set.
Anyone want some of these vegetables? Should I open them up? Feeling healthy? Yeah. Broccoli? There we go. You got me. No one needed scissors. Yeah. That's debatable. Cheese. Lisa, do you have a scissors by any chance?
I do not, but there might be some in those.
Pocket knife would be great. You can only need a pocket knife. This, and this. Thank you.
I think we're all set. We'll just have to go in between our points or our, what am I trying to say? Adobe. Yes, PDFs.
Do you need anything else, Mom?
So I think
Okay.
we are all set.
Yes.
I was gonna see the screen or something.
Yeah. Let's see
I
here.
can't even remember if I wrote notes or not on mine.
So we'll share names here. There is notes on the side, but we can.
Are they showing? Yeah, we don't want to show those.
So the babies are opening.
Oh, I see where it's gonna.
Thank
Either
you.
your notes or you don't see your notes.
Yeah.
And the turkey sausage.
Oh,
And cheese.
Very.
Maybe we'll mega winging it.
Okay.
Like I don't.
Do you know how to put the notes on without
Showing.
showing them? I can also try to download this really quick as a PowerPoint. It might be a little wonky, but
That's fine. I mean, I think if you're just simply screen sharing, it's not gonna, you're not gonna go through that anyway.
yeah.
Kind of have to do like two screens, I guess. So I don't know which you're doing.
I am downloading it as a PowerPoint.
No, I mean more like, are you just duplicating your screen or are you
Yeah,
extending the
because it's
display?
just the HTML because I couldn't get it to connect like let's see here.
So yeah, I think if you want it to not. Let me just take a quick look at my things and I'll probably be able to do it without the notes. Okay, I think I'm good.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Oh, technology.
Yeah. A lot going on this week, so I could have written my notes on some cards or something, but.
Okay, what's going on? Oh. Okay, there. Hello, welcome.
Yeah. You guys, what is the representing?
Point.
Did you guys come in May at all to the
No.
first week talk? How about yourself in the back? Did you come to the other workshop?
Right.
That's okay. We have lots of that. We'll start in just a couple minutes. Laughing and food there. The carrot sticks.
Did you?
What did you know what you're doing?
I don't have no person.
So. Just looking at this year's, I guess.
Then we also have a little handout just about that. So here. So anyone.
Yeah, it does, you know, that's the only time I get it, is when I'm on an airplane.
Yeah. Why do they get one person?
Yeah. When I'm on land, they're like,
And
here.
then you need to, yeah.
But yeah, that's the only time I get to do it.
And that doesn't mean like contiguous neighbors. Like if you're in an HOA,
It could be HOA, that's.
your whole HOA.
Yeah.
Open it up, so I
Oh,
do
my
that.
gosh, that's all.
Fire. That's what we're seeing. Yes, everywhere.
There.
We actually paid our. It was, we just didn't have the capacity.
I mean, HOA or,
Contractors, you get, like the host gets the contractors list. Not a
Are you from, this, yeah.
Exactly. Or whoever's available on the dates.
Conservation.
Whoever. it is. Yeah, this was, you know, males and females. Yeah. No chippers. And also sometimes it's like a company that you're more familiar with, local, like, so we actually have some business that are lost in East County. And some that are basically up, to, you know, with the lunch. Yeah. Someone like.
So you get quite a action on that.
Yeah, we can. They'll be all, yeah, over 100 of them. They're more on their mind. Yeah.
Oh, good for you, okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, our goal is.
Bring some staff in there. Yeah. I don't. That's what it is.
It has to be slash, so like branches and it board.
Yeah.
It doesn't be like grass.
I always thought it was,
If you go to.
it looks like. Smoke, it's kind of like a-
written out a little.
I always heard of something.
Right.
Well, no, they're in City Hall, sorry. I was thinking City Hall.
Yeah, it's called firefighters.org, and then you go, hold down on either the east, or the west programs.
I know, I will. I will get that right.
Thank you.
Right.
I know that there's a lot of communities. That are, there's.
I turf.
Yeah,
And
they-
but typically, they do anything else. That was always a challenge.
You know, sort of
No,
like
that is no.
create that little mind shift of.
You know, and I mean, counting even like HOA is not many HOAs.
I mean, Lafayette used to have it, then when they got the city, compound, like, used
And well, they.
Oh, man, they got killed.
Yeah.
On my leave. And I think other people are like that.
Yeah. Should I know?
I'm not.
What's that?
Enter this year.
Leave disposal services on here?
You can put it in your compost bin.
Well, he said he has to leave too much for his
There will be the fall cleanup in November, so I'll have to find the dates for you guys, but half of the city is gonna be on like one Saturday in November and the other half of the city is gonna be on the next Saturday. Okay. Is this thing on?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually working. Kind of. All right, I'll get started. I think there's some people who still RSVP'd, but they'll roll in. So my name's Lisa. I am the sustainability specialist with the city of Lafayette. This is our second workshop in a series that hopefully will continue on into the future. I really like seeing that you guys are all engaged in this topic. So water conservation for HOAs, this came about from some working groups that happened a couple years ago with a bunch of HOAs that were talking about what they wanted to do, all the things that they were running up against as far as water conservation. And one of the ideas was having some presentations and workshops so people could get to know each other, learn from each other about what they were doing, where they were in the process, maybe share some of those frustrations, and then learn about what are the ideas out there, what is the potential funding out there to help with this. So we had a workshop in May, and if you were not there, we had Northern Water present. And Lindsay, she is the senior water conservation specialist at Northern Water. She shared some grant opportunities. The grant application is actually open right now. So this is, the grant is for turf removal and any xeriscape or water conservation projects. So if you're interested in learning more about that grant, I can share about that in the future. The applications are open now until December 1st. And the application awards are notified in late 2025 and projects are going to start next spring. It is matching grant funds, so you have the potential to receive a max of $25,000 per project, depending on what you're doing, but it is matching funds. So if you have any other questions, I will connect you with Lindsay. She is the expert on that grant, and she went into it in the last workshop, and we have a recording of that, so I can also get that recording out to people if people are interested. We also had Ralph from Coal Creek HOA present on their whole project for upgrading and turf removal and changing their berm to native grasses. And Ron is here. So if you have any follow-up, they had a really successful project with Northern Water, and they had a representative, Ralph, come and talk about their whole process and how they worked with Northern Water. So I can again, send out that recording from the last workshop if you're interested in learning more, or Ron is also a great resource. Resource Central was also there last time, giving a big recap, but there's a lot of really awesome programs with Resource Central. They have garden in a box, lawn removal, and irrigation assessments. So if you're just starting out in this process, I really recommend Resource Central. They have free irrigation assessments. And from there, you can understand, okay, do I need to upgrade my system? Do I want turf removal? Is that something I want to do in the future? So I think, starting with Resource Central is a great resource. So agenda for today, if this will work. We have some awesome presenters. I'm really excited. And these presenters were invited with topics in mind from the last workshop and feedback that we received. I'll be doing a little overview, and then we'll have Boulder County Wildfire Partners present, as well as Wild Ride Design and Western States Reclamation, who helped design the Water Rise demonstration garden at Fire Station number 1. If you've been over there and seen it, it's looking amazing. Looks great all summer, and it's still looking good. There's like little pops of color in the fall. Yeah. Yeah. And then we have an opportunity for Q&A at the end and networking. I like to think of this as an opportunity to talk amongst each other, because I think you all have the same challenges and opportunities to learn from each other. There's a lot of people in different processes and different areas of that process. So if there's someone like Ron who's gone through a whole upgrade of the berm to native grasses, or others who are just starting, this is a great room to talk about that with other people and learn about how you guys are doing that and how you're talking to your landscapers or your board or any of the contractors. It's really great to know these resources from different people. So we'll leave that at the end. I like to start with the bigger picture, because why are we all here? We're talking about water conservation, and the way I like to think about it is the big picture of the Colorado River. Here in Lafayette, we get a very supplemental supply of our water from the Colorado River. Most of it is from the Boulder Creek Basin. But there is a small percentage that we're still getting from the Colorado River. And if you're here in May, I did already talk about this, but I like to hone on this point. Colorado River, 1,450 miles long, providing water to 7 states. There is out of basin use. There is 5.5 million acres of farmland, and there's 40 million people that the Colorado River serves. Down here in the Imperial Valley, if you're eating lettuce in the winter, you're probably benefiting from the Colorado River going all the way down to California. That's where a lot of our lettuce is grown, as well as a lot of other crops. Water is life, and it's really important, and it's, why we're all here talking about this. But I think it's really good to look at the bigger picture of why we're here, why we're talking about water use, because this isn't just an us issue. This is an issue across 40 million people, and looking at water conservation. And another part of the bigger picture is climate change and drought impacting our water supplies. Water is going to be increasingly impacted by warmer temperatures, drier soils. This was just a snapshot of last week, October 3rd. But this trend is continuing to be seen throughout Colorado and throughout the whole West. So thinking about water supply and water conservation is something we're going to have to keep thinking about. One thing that really impacted me was knowing that if climate change is going to continue to impact our planet, and we're going to continue to see warmer temperatures. This is a stat from USGS. For every 2 degrees Fahrenheit, we see an average temperature increase. The stream flow is reduced by about 9%. with that, if you think about 40 million people who rely on the Colorado River, 10% decrease, that's 4 million people that could be impacted. That just like gives me goosebumps thinking about that and just how we're going to have to think about water collectively, not just individually. So building resiliency, the future is going to look different from the past. We know that. We know the climate is warming. So because of that, our landscapes are going to have to look different. Thinking about outdoor water use, 50% of the water we use outdoors is lost to inefficient irrigation. So what can we do? You guys are all here being proactive, thinking about choosing efficient irrigation, thinking about designing for our climate, and just educating and advocating for what you guys are all here for. So I have really awesome speakers. I'm really excited to have you guys hear from them. Abby is going to go first. I'll have you just introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you.
Do you want this?
I don't think I need it. Can everyone hear me? Okay. And I'm gonna, oops, no, not that. Thinking I would set a timer so I'd keep on somewhat on track. So we've just been hearing about climate change and the impacts that happen. And I think we've all come to realize that in addition to reduced amount of water, we are also having an elevated amount of wildfire in our county. And if you're making the effort to modify your landscaping, you may as well implement wildfire resiliency into the new landscape systems. So I've been to several HOAs in the county, including one at least in Lafayette, that started off thinking about water-wise, and then they were like, while we're doing that, how do we make this more fire resilient? So I am going to touch on that. Sorry, I'm figuring out how the controls work here. So I'm just quickly going to go through what is wildfire and how it could impact us in the East County, some general wildfire mitigation best practices with a focus on landscaping, some programs that we have, and for those of you who haven't seen them, we have some handouts on the back table there. And then what are the unique opportunities for HOAs to influence wildfire mitigation best practices in your community? So what is wildfire? It's fire that starts in the wildlands, in the vegetation. And you may be thinking, well, we're pretty far east. There's not like large sections of wildlands out here. And I'm sure that's true. However, what we saw from the Marshall Fire is wildland fire can cascade, and it's not what I thought I was going for, but and embers, I guess, can blow for long distances, like several miles. And what happens is that they ignite fine fuels wherever they may be. And if those fuels are continuous and have a continuous run to a home, they could lead to the home ignition. So even if your community isn't necessarily on fire, if there is a large scale fire event, as we saw also in Marshall Fire, the response resources can get overwhelmed. And suddenly what could have been something fairly simple to control in a community isn't being controlled because there's nobody there to respond. So wildfire is not the same as a house fire. I don't want to cause like fear and anxiety in people. If you have your neighbor catches their kitchen on fire, the fire department will respond in a timely way. They're well equipped to handle multiple, like 2, 3, 4 events at the same time. What they're ill-equipped to do is deal with 1,000 homes on fire at once. So when there are no responders and that fire enters the community, it can lead to urban conflagration, as we saw. And fire can spread from home to home in a variety of ways, either through direct flame contact if the homes are close enough together, through radiant heat if the homes are close together but not that close together, and then as I talked about before, from embers sort of flying through the air. And now there's my ember. So this is a picture inside of a laboratory where they scientists test sort of different building materials, different combinations of materials and vegetation, and see how to reduce the impact from embers. And I don't know if you can see, but where the hot spot is up here, there's a little bush there. There's wood mulch. So, you know, they're just sort of trying to statistically determine how to reduce this risk. 90% of the fires that start are ignited by embers. And again, embers in and of themselves aren't going to ignite a home. They'll bounce off the siding, but then they cascade down to the ground, or they get caught in the gutters, ignite the combustible material that's caught in the gutters. If the gutters are not a non-combustible material, like you have vinyl gutters, the gutters themselves can become a fuel source. They'll sort of catch fire and drip down to the ground. So what do we do about that? We actually have tools that we can use. And I'm going to focus briefly on community resiliency, talk quite more in depth about defensible space, and then sort of slip through home hardening and emergency preparedness. If folks are interested, we can talk about that either in the Q&A or afterwards, but I know that that's not really the focus of today's workshop, so I don't want to get bogged down because I could go on and on forever about any of these topics. So, but community resiliency is really important. That's you all working together. And especially in neighborhoods where the homes are less than like 50 to 70 feet apart from each other, what happens on one person's property is going to impact the results on someone else's property. So I don't know how familiar folks are. This is Forest Service style infographic about tree spacing. The basic takeaway that I just want to leave you all with here is that we can impact the results of wildfire by thoughtfully planning or thoughtfully modifying both the vertical and horizontal spacing of our fuels. So as you get closer to the home, you want to have a little bit more distance between things, break up. You know, when I say fuels, I'm talking about our landscaping plants, our landscaping materials, the trees, the shrubs, the mulches, etc. So I just want to kind of focus on the concept of ladder fuels. And how many people here have heard that term before? Okay, so about half of you have. Bear with me, I'm going to explain it somewhat briefly, but it's kind of what this shows. You have embers, they land on something that's combustible, like those ground junipers that all tend to trap woody debris underneath that's going to ignite quickly, or the tall grasses that are dry and easily ignited. That carries the fire into that big pine tree, which is right next to the house. Once that tree is flaming, there's a lot of additional embers being created and an enormous amount of heat being created. That heat can either lead to like windows cracking, the embers can penetrate through any openings that might be unprotected in the house. And then once that first house is on fire, again, that's just amplifying the heat, the embers, et cetera, et cetera. Don't want to dwell too much on that, but that's what happened during the Marshall Fire repeatedly. So some landscaping best practices. Number one, avoid foundation plantings close to the house. That sounds kind of self-evident. Particular culprits are junipers. I'm going to pick on them a lot because they are the most volatile plants we have. They also are really unpleasant to clean around because they're so prickly. So they tend to accumulate a lot of dead biomass underneath. They also tend to trap a lot of blowing trash and so on and so forth. So there's a reason why our firefighters call them gasoline plants, because they really do ignite easily and burn really hot. And just one foundational thing to keep in mind about landscaping, and this kind of harkens back to what I was saying about horizontal and vertical separation of plants. Most plants, if they ignite, will throw flames that are like about 3 times the height of what's burning. Whether if it's super windy, that flame length might be going more horizontal. If it's less windy, it'll be going vertical. So if you have like 4-inch tall grass, you need about a foot at the minimum of separation between that grass and whatever is above it. If you have a juniper, that flame length can increase to like 5 to 7 times the size of the plant. So that's one other reason why junipers themselves are particularly fire prone. And I don't want to sound like I mean, I love the environment, and junipers are a natural part of, especially of our mountain ecosystems. In the built environment, they're definitely more like ornamentals that have been introduced. It's not the worst thing in the world to have an occasional plant out in the middle of sort of your open space area, but we really like to not see any of them within 30 feet of a home. I know that's probably a heavy lift for a lot of HOAs in this community, but again, it's something we can be working towards with our long-term visioning. Another one is avoid planting plants under, or like allowing plants to grow under your deck, and especially when you get into those more volatile conifers like junipers or the mugo pines or any ornamental blue spruce or whatever. Create more distance from the deck, because decks are generally speaking made of wood. Again, an ignition source that is going to draw flame to your home. And back to what I was saying about that flame length, if something does catch fire, that's why we suggest limbing up your conifer trees so that there's more than that separation between the surface and the lowest needles of the plants. So the difference between conifers and deciduous plants, deciduous are the ones with, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk down to people, but I have met plenty of people who just don't know the difference. So super quickly, deciduous are the ones that drop their leaves. They have a lot of moisture in their leaves, and when it freezes outside, if those leaves are still on the plant, that can damage the plant. So they have evolved to drop them in the fall. Conifers have more like oils in their needles so that they don't have to go through that cycle. But those oils are, again, pretty volatile. With the deciduous plants, they're not that combustible when they're green, but they leave a lot of leaf litter in the fall, which I was talking to a gentleman here about earlier. So even though maybe the best practice from landscaping is to mulch those or leave them on the surface, maybe not in our neighborhoods. And then creating that sort of bare space, so don't plant things under trees, especially under your conifer trees, and create conditions so that you'll be able to rake out any materials that accumulate under those trees. That being said, and I think these folks are the experts on more like the landscaping, but I don't think we want to cut too much up in terms of like low limbing those trees. In the forest, the standard is to go up 8 to 10 feet. And I think that's sort of like how far you can easily reach with a chainsaw. My understanding is that in more like where the trees are more solitary, that could create issues with the wind. So our advice is really just go like about 3 feet, which gives you a nice safety margin on the flame length of the vegetation underneath that without hopefully compromising the health of the tree. And then I think we all are talking about the same thing, like re-envisioning how we think about landscaping. And there's a lot of beautiful sort of, I hate to even say xeriscape. I feel like that brings up this idea of like Arizona, where you have like one cactus in the middle of a field of rocks. But around here, there's a lot of ways to create a lot of beauty, but we want to apply some sort of some best practices around wildfire in addition to landscaping. So here's the advice that we share with people, which is plant in islands as opposed to having like continuous masses of vegetation, and sprinkle that with hardscape, like decorative rocks, gravel, stepping stones, pathways, whatever you need to do. Also, putting lower growing plants closer to the home and putting your shrubs and trees further away from the house is a good practice. That way, if you do end up with fire in that vegetation, it's buffered from your home. Like when there isn't fuel, you're not going to have fire. Or if there's minimal fuel, you'll have low intensity fire instead of high intensity fire. So another possibility is to use, any kind of artsy fartsy ideas that you might have, like mix in some sculpture, plant things in non-combustible flower pots that can be moved or not necessarily need to be moved, but that are small amounts of vegetation, and some of the color might be coming from the pot. And also those plants tend to be irrigated, so they're less likely to catch fire even if embers are flying around. Re-envision mulching, and I don't know if you all are going to go into that much, but we really don't want to see wood mulch anywhere within, I mean, ideally not within 15 feet of the house, but definitely we advocate for a 5-foot non-combustible zone around your home that would be hardscaped, whether that's concrete apron or gravel or paving stones or something like that. And then you can use mulch like that squeegee mulch or pea gravel mulch to help maintain the moisture around your plants. And actually, to go back, turf is, I know we're sort of trying to get away from that, but there are low water turfs as well. And that is actually a pretty fire resilient landscaping option. I don't know if you may contradict me because it may not be the most water wise, but especially some of the natives like bunch grasses that are a little more sparse, I think. And honestly, like focusing on native plants because they are adapted to this kind of climate. They're not going to wither if you aren't able to water them as quickly, and they'll hold more moisture in them. So again, I'll leave that to the experts to really go into the details on which plants you use, but I think my go-to is like natives or some of those succulent, like low growth succulents, rock plants, something like that. So what is the county bringing to the table to help impact some behavior change here? As many of you may know, the county passed, or we county residents passed a wildfire mitigation sales tax just about 2 years ago in November. We're honestly just still trying to figure out how to use that money to best help and impact and influence the most number of people in the whole county. So this is where we started this year. This was a pilot, and I think we already have a lot of ideas about how we can expand on this for next year. But until October 31st of 2024, individual homeowners can apply for a $500 rebate for doing one of these 4 actions. And I'm gonna kind of go through them one by one. Junking your junipers. I think maybe this is a familiar sight to some of us. Homes where those junipers were planted 50 years ago, they have kind of turned into a wall or a mass of vegetation. So I know $500 isn't gonna pay to get rid of all of that, but you can make a start closer to your home, move out. The program does pay homeowners for their own time. It's an honor system thing. And though you do have to submit pictures, so, you know, you can't necessarily say you spent 400 hours taking out one plant, but, you can get reimbursed for that and up to $500.
If you get reimbursed, if any increments then, in other words, you take pictures, say, okay, I've done this.
Yeah, so you take before pictures, you submit that, and then you submit an after picture, and then you either submit your invoices or, I have to admit, I haven't gotten to the end of the process yet, though I'm doing some of this on my house. I think if it's just, you submit like, an hourly thing, like how many hours you spent on it, and the hourly rate, I think, is around $24 an hour, so, and it can be a combination of time and materials. Whoops. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up. It's for individual homeowners. Yeah, and I'm about to go through them one at a time too, but yes, junk your junipers, the first 5 feet, which is that gravel around the house, fences or fuses, which I'll go into in just a second, and screening vents, which I'm actually going to sort of skip over because it's pretty technical. And if anyone wants to talk to me about it, we can just discuss it afterwards. But I want to be respectful of not going too much over time here. So the first 5 feet, putting gravel or some kind of hardscape surface around the home. Fences, I think we've all heard of how they impacted the spread of fire during the Marshall Fire and in plenty of other situations as well. So the idea with that is, if you can only do something, do the first 5 feet that leads up to your house, and ideally it will break up that fuse, and it's very nicely combined here with graveling as well. So you're really reducing the potential for ignition considerably. The middle photo there shows how you can retrofit parts of your fence, like if some part of it's falling down, rebuild that section with a non-combustible material so that, again, fire doesn't have a continuous fuse. It might run through the combustible parts, but then it would stop at the non-combustible part. And then finally, if you really have like not the money to switch out a long section of fences, and I know some HOAs are maybe completely surrounded by wood fence, you can at least create that non-combustible separation next to the fence with some gravel. It's not the ideal, but you know, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. So I did want to share at least some idea that might be pretty low cost. And that's for you as a community. That's not something that we pay for with the rebate program. The county also has free community chipping services. There's a handout about that on the back table too. One person hosts. You need at least 5 total community members. That can be, they don't have to be contiguous neighbors. That can be 5 people in your HOA to participate. Generally speaking, if you have 100 people or so and put it out there, you're going to get 10 to 25 people signing up. The homeowner has to stage the material at the curbside, and then the host picks a contractor, and the contractor comes and chips and removes all of the biomass, and it's completely free. And then as far as HOAs, you have a different kind of power than most of us do, because you all have a regulatory structure that you work with. So if you want to be the heavy or feel comfortable or just feel like your insurance company is forcing you in that direction or whatever, you know, you have the potential at least to create regulatory rules or requirements for people to comply with as you so choose. So one thing that you can also do is create a sort of cohesive strategy to manage your communal land, sort of leading by example. You can sign up for one of our programs. You can create a community cleanup day or something that helps bring the community together and sort of underscores the principles of wildfire resiliency and landscape management. And then you could look at your covenants and, you know, require people or encourage them or whatever to make some changes. Wood fencing would be, I would think, a number one place to start looking beyond the landscaping. Wood roofs, if anyone's in an HOA that still has those. I know Gun Barrel has like hundreds of them still. I don't know so much about out here. And then you can encourage or require certain landscaping choices. And if anyone wants more time on these topics, I will be around. And I'm going to turn it over to, I don't know which of y'all is coming up, but. It's not advancing to their slides though, so you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I learned a lot.
Oh, good.
And I don't think we broke too many rules, but we did the best we could in this case.
It is at a fire station.
We did consider the response time was very low. So my name is Christy Schneider. I'm a landscape architect here in Lafayette. I have my own business. It's called Wild Dry Design. I've been on my own for 9 years, and I've been fortunate to work on a lot of projects here in Lafayette. Most recently is this demonstration garden, which you're seeing a picture of up on the screen. It's in front of Fire Station 1, as Lisa mentioned. Is anybody familiar with this demonstration garden? Has anybody been out there? Lovely, happy to see it. For those of you that haven't, we're gonna just go through it a little bit, talk more about waterwise design and just kind of roll through the 7 principles and specifically how we apply those at the garden. My husband Joe is here as well. He's also a landscape architect, that ended up in the contracting world, and his company, Western States, actually built this project, which is the first time we've collaborated professionally. So that was kind of a fun opportunity for us to work together, and it happens to be right down the street from where we live, so we see it all the time. I have to live with the choices we have made and we continue to make. I'm sure we print it, but I'm sorry I introduced you.
No, that's fine. Thank you. No, it was a fun project to work on. Just my work experience. We do large scale restoration projects and native conversions and playgrounds. And this was a fun project to work on. We could do a demonstration for everyone and do a turf conversion and start setting examples here in Lafayette.
I didn't include a good before picture, but before we took on this project, it was all just bluegrass with some existing trees. So we're going to go through just reviewing what is waterwise, and then the 7 principles of waterwise design, specifically how we applied those at the Lafayette Demonstration Garden, and then have a little time for questions and share a few of our favorite resources. It can be a little overwhelming. There's so many people out there that want to help, and there's just, you know, really an abundance of information. So just trying to narrow it down with a few that we find especially helpful in this area. So what is waterwise? I'm just going to read it because I worked really hard on this definition, and I left this pamphlet here. But the city, after we designed the garden, asked me to help with developing signage. So there's a number of signs out at the garden, but in addition, there's this brochure that we created. And there's some really good information in here. It's a tidy little package. It's not too heavy, but there's good
good resources, and some of the things we're talking about today. So really I piggyback this presentation off of this brochure. But a water-wise landscape is one that is functional, beautiful, and thrives with less work and water. It's not xeriscaping, like Abby was alluding to. It's not just rock. Rather, it's a diverse combination of native drought-resistant plants and then also permeable materials such as rock, pathways. It doesn't have to all be plant material that create an attractive water-efficient landscape. So you can see up there a few pictures of the demonstration garden and some of the signs that we have out there with more information.
And you could go xeriscape, you could just do rock. I mean, you're gonna save water, but you're not gonna have the other benefits like the cooling effects or the aesthetics of it or the pollinator piece of it too. You can use active in something that you want to connect with.
So a successful water-wise landscape utilizes really the 7 xeriscaping garden principles, and we try not to use the word xeriscaping much either, just because it's often misunderstood, and people really do think you're saying xeriscaping. So that's why we really leaned into water-wise for this garden and are using that terminology. But the goal to save water, time, and resources. So these are the 7 principles of that. I'm not going to read them because we're going to go through them here. First one, planning and design. I think this one's pretty obvious, but before you start, make a plan and come up with, what you're trying to do, what your goals are. And just, I don't need to go into the details of designing, but thinking about your irrigation system that you have. What sun do you have? What existing trees are you working with? So specific for the demonstration garden, we had some existing trees we were working with, working around. And then otherwise it was, like I said, bluegrass. So we worked with the city to develop some goals to guide the design. And so I've listed those here. Using native plants was really important to them and to showcase that to the community for some of the reasons Abby listed, and then also what Lisa talked about.
I thought one of the good points on the previous slide too is like a long-term goal for your property. Not only like having in mind what you want, but also the resources you have to maintain it, whether it's your own energy or the money to pay someone else to maintain it, and like how you're thinking about how much you're planting and what that means is going to be over time. Because a lot of times you'll get into like, especially a private homeownership, it's like someone's just not able to maintain what they already have, which it could be successful, but it's just like keeping that in your planning, putting those goals together.
And speaking of maintenance, that's something the city did think about with this space, because this was going to be a denser type of planting and just more than the Parks Department typically maintains at their parks. And so they worked with Joe and his company to at least provide the maintenance for the first 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And then maybe beyond that. But they knew right away, like, this is beyond what we can manage in addition to all the other things we're trying to take care of. So we need to outsource this.
And then on the HOA level, or like looking the scale of Denver, or like a big conversion there too, is like, I like the projects where if we're doing a conversion, we're planting new grasses. I want to be in control of that the first couple of years where it's establishing. Because I know when to mow or when to take care of the weeds. I think that's really successful to have an end product that you can turn over and actually be efficient and successful. So if you can, keep the professional on board or tie that in.
So just going back to this, a few of the other goals, we obviously want to make this really pollinator friendly. Pollinators is a big thing right now. I'm actually on the steering committee. We're trying to make Lafayette a pollinator district, which is something that the Butterfly Pavilion is managing. There's only one other community in Colorado that has achieved pollinator district designation, and that's Manitou Springs. So we're trying to become the second or third. There's a few other communities that are working through it now, but it's a 3 to 5 year process. I don't need to get into that, but it's important to include pollinator friendly plant material. And then also we wanted to showcase some lawn alternatives, just so people know that there are options out there beyond bluegrass, and it doesn't I feel like sometimes when you're thinking about water-wise landscapes, maybe the image that comes into people's head, if it isn't a rockscape, is a really detailed perennial type garden. But there's a lot of other ways to approach a water-wise landscape. And then we wanted to showcase the Garden in the Box program. That's a really good resource for residents. So including that in the garden and showing them, maybe an easier path to a quick conversion was important. And then some of the fire escaping principles that Abby talked about. And then also making it as educational as possible to the community. So including a lot of the signage, brochures, creating spaces that they can host classes and tours out there was another priority in this project. I'm talking a lot. We should.
Sure. Practical turf areas, like sometimes we get stuck on eliminating turf or turf is bad. But there's also benefits. We kept our backyard because we have kiddos, but we reduced it. If you have pets, the benefits of having it. Fire escaping is another thing. I think it makes a good break. It also has a cleaning effect, like that on your house too. So just being smart about the area that you're keeping and how that's being irrigated is one good step forward. And then also just taking cues, like maybe there's successful areas in your yard that you could keep, and there's some areas that struggle that you're wasting water overall, trying to nurse along throughout the season. So just being practical where and how to use turf, and then also looking at turf alternatives, which we saw in the demonstration garden. We did conversions. We did a buffalo grass seed, a blue grama grass seed, and a low grass seed. We established those, and then you can manage them. You can mow them, or you can let them grow. You can see the seed heads. It's also really nice to have in a landscape.
Currently, they're mowed.
Currently, they're mowed. That was a black but and they'll grow back. But yeah, it's those converting areas into native grasses also takes some work. It's not going to be instant. You're gonna have to manage weeds, and you're gonna have to establish that in water to get things going on the front end, and then you can start reducing and seeing the savings on the back end.
Specific to the garden, we included some turf for demonstration purposes. It's also nice to provide a little space along the pathway sometimes. If plants start to crowd into the pathway, it can feel uncomfortable. So just providing a little space, breathing room. And then there are cost savings with converting, areas to a lawn alternative versus all perennials or shrubs or a denser type of planting style. So I think that previous presentation was really great. Lisa showed me some of what Lindsay shared. And there's some really good information about that. So I'm not going to go into the details of converting, a large bluegrass area to a low water native type of grass. But there are really good resources out there. And I actually just recently attended a native grass conversion workshop that Northern Water put on. And something I learned throughout that day of presentations was about this Colorado Native Grass Guide. Super, super great resource. It is a PDF that you can download, but it's also a website. And I have a website link at the end. But man, it really guides you through the whole process. It has really good information about these 3 lawn alternatives that we included in the garden, but also others, different seed mixes. And it's just really well done.
And
so I would definitely. But yeah, there's the before picture I didn't share at the beginning, but that's what it looked like before we got our hands on it. Julie talking about soil.
Yeah, soil improvements, like the one thing I see as a commercial landscaper is like, if you don't have the right soils, or if you're not pressing on whoever's building the project ahead of you, or if you're building your own project, if you're not pressing on deep compaction and knowing what soils you have for your plants to go in, you're gonna have a hard time having success throughout the project. So getting to know your soils, what you have, if you need amendments, that's another thing that could be a cost savings. Sometimes your soil is good enough to not need amendment. And if someone's recommending a bunch of compost, the compost could be beneficial, but it might be an extra cost. So just knowing your soils, making sure you have deep compaction in the areas so the plants can be successful are important. And then we've listed CO2 extension here. One, they have great resources. I use them all the time. And then they also have a soil lab where you can take your soil samples. So
Specific for the garden. Really, we just brought in compost and then tilled the areas that were.
it was a small enough area, and we're familiar enough with the soils here, where compost management was a good idea. Like on a larger HOA type conversion though, the cost of compost at a rate that's commonly recommended to run you $3,000 to $4,000 an acre. And so that cost would add up. So knowing your soils, there's also granular minerals if you're doing the conversion, that are organic, that are slow release, that can also benefit. So,
And then
thanks.
beyond that, if you're using native plant material, it's not going to need as rich of a soil. I mean, many of those plants are adapted for the soils and climate we have in this region. So you're not going to, I guess, knowing where you're going to, but once you take the soil test, as far as what you're implementing. So related to that, low water plants, choose hardy, drought tolerant, native plants, shrubs, grasses, and low water turf alternatives. And be sure to group them according to water needs. Has everybody heard the term hydro zones? It's just a way to organize your plant material so you can be most efficient with your irrigation. So just talking a little bit more about plant selection. This is a big topic. This could be a whole presentation. But some things we wanted to highlight were using the resources available. Some of the ones I'm going to include at the end. There's online resources. There's so many professionals out there who want to help. Visiting your local nursery is really great. Just walking around, seeing the plant material, talking to the people who are working with it every day. And also just knowing what's available. Sometimes you can really go down a rabbit hole and be like, oh man, this is the plant. And then you can't find it anywhere. So what's the point of that? And Joe deals with that a lot on a lot of plants he gets. There's a bunch of plants that he can't source locally. And so then you end up making a lot of substitutions, which is a challenge as well. The Garden in a Box program, like I mentioned, is amazing. Somebody's already fought through it all. They're great plants for this area. You can easily get them. And then they give you so much information about planting them and the maintenance of them. And then like I mentioned before, sometimes water-wise landscapes, I feel like you picture, this really bright perennial-based landscape, but shrubs and trees are a really important part of the mix too, and can cover a much bigger area than perennials, so you can keep your cost a little lower by using some of those bigger plant materials.
And their future work.
What's that?
And their future work, like spring cleanups and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, shrubs and trees that are taking some space that are a little bit larger than your cutback and your general maintenance in the spring is probably a little bit less. Or can be.
Yeah, and then just from a design point, planting and massings is really helpful for this garden. Most of the people that are viewing this are driving by at about, I guess they're slowing down by then. So 25 miles per hour. So your visual impact is a lot higher if you can group some of those colors together. Otherwise it can get really chaotic. This is actually a really challenging design problem, a demonstration garden, just because there is so much that you're trying to do in this small space. So it's a little busy for my preference, but we managed. So we have the garden in the box around the outside, but in that area I have labeled as A, was the area that I selected the plant material for. And so I tried to use massings and then kind of create some repetition. So you're not, just having a scattergun effect of all these plants. There's some cohesion across the space.
And the garden's really cool. It might be in the pamphlet too, but it has like the garden in the box and which one was purchased and which one was used in the area. So then if you go out there and you can see the plants and see how they've grown and know what box you're ordering and what you're paying for at that time.
Yeah. And one other point we had on here is keep it simple. As we're talking about all these things, it's going to be really overwhelming, but in the end, really, if you put a couple plants in the ground and start there, that's a great place to start. And you can always add, you can always change your mind. These are some of the plants I included in the area that I designed. These are, I would call them some heavy hitters in this area. They're just really great for many reasons. Most of them are super pollinator friendly. They have long lasting blooms. Some of those grasses have really fantastic color in the fall, and the seed heads are great through the winter. And generally they're low maintenance. Some of these you could go out and deadhead and you might be able to get a second bloom, but in general, we're not doing that in the garden. We're just doing one spring cleanup, and then just leaving them to naturalize on their own the rest of the season. And then most of these are native as well. And I just wanted to point out that we also have some signage out there that's really helpful. We have some native plant highlight signs with more information on a few of the plants we wanted to, like I said, highlight. And then we also have plant ID tags out there, which is really helpful. Yeah, we'll wrap this up.
Mulch is an important aspect to the landscape, especially for plants. It helps keep the moisture in. You can use wood mulches or the squeegee rock mulches are commonly used. Both are effective. I think that a lot of the xeric plants might be more successful with the drier squeegee type mulch, but you can also be successful with the wood mulch, which you used at the garden. One thing you want to make sure though is to keep it away from the stems of the plants. You don't want the water sitting next to that necessarily, so you that way. But you're helping keep moisture in and become more efficient with the water.
Yeah, we actually originally had different mulches for the different areas in the spirit of a demonstration garden. But that was a decision that was made in construction. We just simplified, and it's all a wood mulch with the exception of the non-combustible buffer up against the building. The police station next to us actually has all rock. So you can kind of get a feel for, how those feel. We went with wood mulch just because it's a cooler, softer feel, and it just felt more appropriate for what we were doing here. But we did break it up with these paths. And I think you've seen in some of the other photos, we have some flagstone steppers. So I think there are some of the concepts you were talking about breaking up the different planting beds with some hardscape to create a little bit of breaks.
One thing is you don't want to get too deep either. You don't want to create an area where like you're suffocating plant material and nothing's getting down to the soil. And then you can get that kind of a rotted layer. It becomes impenetrable. So you're going to be aware of that too, like just enough mulch, and then just keep an eye on it. Add up over time. So it's kept back from the plants, and then also over time, if you maybe try some areas to keep the moisture. This is a big one.
Yeah, this is a whole other presentation.
Yeah. So many times, like we can, and I work for Northern Colorado Water for a while too. And you can put in the lowest water, you can put in a very low water using landscape or alternative grass. But if you're not managing the water correctly and reducing it over time or watering only when you need to, you're not going to have the cost savings, you're not going to have the benefit of saving water. So it's one of those things like, okay, you've had a great irrigation system put in, you've had hydro zones, you have the right drip system, but if no one's monitoring that and adjusting your sprinklers, especially after it comes off establishment, you can water it, it can still thrive, but you're not necessarily seeing the benefits of the efforts that you put towards making it efficient. And one of the studies that I was a part of in school was that in its own as an HOA said that they were saving waters down in Colorado Springs, but you looked at the water bill and the water usage and it never took it. It's because whoever was managing it wasn't making the effort to watch it. And that wasn't one of his goals, right? His goal was just to so it's one of the biggest things is make sure if you're having someone do it for you, make sure that they schedule not only for establishment but for long-term success. And then make sure you're checking on it yourself as far as when the seasons go, you kind of see different water at different times. And make sure that you're watering.
And I think Ralph shared in the previous workshop, just checking your irrigation system, even if you're not doing a conversion, but you're just, keeping your existing landscape, checking for leaks, going through it, taking advantage of the Slow the Flow program that Resource Central offers, just to yeah, see if you're putting on the right amount of water to start with. Who knows? Maybe you're super overwatering.
And then it can tell you too,
Yeah.
like where you might have an error or like something that's not functioning correctly in your yard, and then maybe you have a brown spot. Right? They can come out there and be like, okay, your coverage is diving out of irrigation head. And so a lot of people's reaction is like, man, I need to water more, and they pump up everything to water more. You're using more water and more cost. And it could be a really simple fix that this free resource can come out there and then just take it off. So it's a really cool resource.
This was just related to irrigation specifically at the garden. And I think you covered a lot of these points already.
Yeah, when we're doing big conversions, like we're watering to get establishment, you gotta get the seed to germinate. So you're kind of keeping out the moisture wet on the surface and then watering to do that. But then as the roots grow deeper and it starts germinating and establishing, you're gonna start watering deeper and less frequently. And then once you have a good stand, you can cut it off entirely. You can do it. You can space it all a little more.
At this workshop I attended recently too, there was a lady that presented and she was great. I wish I could remember her name right now. But don't forget about the existing trees. A lot of times people start cutting down their water and convert an area, and the existing trees get their water cut off that they've been used to. And she said they're seeing a shocking number of large mature trees dying due to that. And so that's a real bummer because we need those trees for all the reasons.
Something we did at the fire station then was all of the mature existing trees got their own inline emitters around the tree in their own zone, so we could water them on their own differently from the new plants, the perennials and the grasses that were there. And then we use three different, as far as the fishing goes, we use three different types of irrigation. We have pop-up spray, which I would recommend doing like a rotary spray instead of the pop-up spray. It's like a newer, more concentrated stream, so you're not getting drip. We also used subsurface drip, which is just like inline emitters, so it's like long run jab emitters every 18 inches. And we did that for the garden in the box area because it was kind of a tighter planting. So running all the poly tube and all the spaghetti lines to each individual plant would have been cumbersome. A lot of resources just put into that. There's a more efficient way to do it. And then the larger shrubs and plants, we use poly pipe with individual emitters that have like specific pipe going to them. So there's three different types of irrigation happening.
Yeah, we're almost there. Maintenance.
Don't overlook maintenance, especially if you're converting a perennial bed or if you're seeding new like a native seed mix or one of the mono stands with blue grama or buffalo grass. You're going to have weeding the first seasons a little bit more than once it gets established. And then throughout the season, that's probably going to be one of your biggest things. And then you're going to have two big cleanups typically. The biggest one in the spring, if you leave it through the winter, like your grasses and the perennials, you have a spring cutback, which is quite a bit of an effort. And then other than that, monitoring irrigation and your water use after that, and then just keeping up on the weeds and making sure you're stuff. But you're going to be mowing a lot less as you convert to native, which is cost savings, and you can start diving back in on it as well.
Okay, these are some of those resources I mentioned. The first one is waterwiseyards.org. This is through Resource Central, and it was actually kind of buried in there. I'm pretty familiar with Resource Central, but this was kind of a new layer of their website that I was unfamiliar with, but it really goes through all the things we just talked about in a lot more detail. There's really good mulch information, soil prep, all the things. It's really nicely done. And then Lafayette has a good page about water conservation and some of the programs we discussed, Slow the Flow, the turf removal, and then the garden in a box. They have links to those and then a few other resources and maybe just some tips. Really a lot of the things that are included in this brochure. Waterwiseplants.org is actually through Colorado Springs Utility. But it's a really good website. It's really well done where you can, if you know, maybe what size of tree or what size of plant you're looking for and the specifics of the area you're looking to put that, it can filter down to a really good list of plants, and it has a bunch of information about that plant once you get there, as far as what it needs and in terms of water or maintenance, all the things. It's just really well done and has plants that, you know, thrive in this area. And then Colorado Extension, we talked about them being a great resource. This is one PDF they have in particular that highlights some good native plants for the Front Range. And then ColoradoNativeGrass.org is the grass conversion guide I was talking about. It's both a website, but you can also download a PDF and print that if you prefer to have a hard copy of something. That's really great if you're looking to convert a large turf area. And then since I've been learning more about the Butterfly Pavilion and what they offer through this pollinator district push, they actually offer some consultation services for commercial landscapes. And I don't know specifically if they reach out to HOAs or how that works, but they'd be worth talking to because I know they are trying to do a lot of good things out there. And then beyond that, that's our contact information if you'd like to reach out to us for more information, or be happy to meet you at the garden and talk about it. It's just down the hill. It's a short bike ride away.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
If you guys are interested, we can stick around and have Abby and Kristen Joe come up and we can ask questions. We can have I have like some questions I've been thinking about as far as like, what are your challenges, things that you might want to discuss while you're here and always included in the room. But I'll open it up.
Let me ask you question first. Let me ask you second, the landscape people. One, beautiful